The rain hammered against my office window like bullets on tin, each drop a reminder of how everything in this godforsaken city seemed designed to beat you down. I sat hunched over Andrea's laptop at 2 a.m, nursing my third bourbon and trying to figure out why her machine kept freezing up every time she opened her email. My name's Jake Morrison, and I fix broken things for a living. Computers mostly, though I used to fix broken faces back when I thought boxing might be my ticket out of this Rust Belt nightmare. These days, Morrison Tech Solutions operates out of a cramped storefront on 5th Street, sandwiched between a pawn shop and a place that sells discount mattresses to people whose dreams have already been repoed. Andrea had been complaining about her laptop for weeks, and since I'm apparently the family IT department, along with being the husband she barely acknowledges anymore, here I was, elbow deep in her digital life while she slept upstairs in our bed that might as well have been separated by the Berlin Wall. The cursor spun endlessly as I tried to access her documents folder. Something was hogging memory, probably some bloated software update or a virus she'd picked up browsing legal databases. I opened the task manager and started hunting through running processes when I noticed something odd. A folder labeled Personal was syncing constantly to a cloud drive I didn't recognize. Now, I'm not the type to go snooping through my wife's private files. 23 years of marriage had taught me that everyone needs their secrets, their little corners of privacy. But this folder was eating up bandwidth like a starving man at a buffet, and if I was going to fix her machine, I needed to know what was causing the bottleneck. I clicked on it. The folder opened to reveal subfolders with names that made my stomach clench like a fist. Hotel receipts. Photos, do not open. Messages, Matt. Matt, her colleague at the law firm. The guy she'd been working late with for the past 6 months. The reason she'd been coming home at midnight smelling like expensive cologne, that sure as hell wasn't mine. My finger hovered over the mouse. This was the moment, wasn't it? The fork in the road where I could either close the laptop, go upstairs, and pretend I'd never seen this, or click that folder and watch my world explode like a cheap firework. I clicked. The messages folder contained hundreds of text conversations, and I didn't need to read more than the first few to understand what I was looking at. Andrea and Matt had been carrying on for months, and they weren't exactly subtle about it. The photos folder was worse. Hotel rooms, restaurant tables, and images I really didn't need burned into my retinas at this hour of the night. But it was the hotel receipts that really drove the knife home. The Grand Riverside Hotel, every Thursday for the past 4 months, the same nights she'd claimed to be working late on the Henderson case. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen, waiting for the rage to hit, waiting for the urge to storm upstairs and confront her, to throw her laptop against the wall and demand explanations she'd never give honestly anyway. Instead, I felt something else entirely. Something cold and calculating that reminded me of the old days in the ring, when I'd take a hard shot to the jaw, and instead of going down, I'd smile and start planning my counterpunch. I opened a new browser window and started taking screenshots. Every message, every photo, every receipt. I saved them all to a thumb drive, methodically documenting the evidence of my wife's betrayal like I was building a case file, which, in a way, I suppose I was. By the time I finished, dawn was creeping through the office window, painting everything in shades of gray that seemed appropriate for the occasion. I could hear Andrea moving around upstairs, getting ready for another day at the office where she'd pretend to be working late while actually rolling around with Matt in some overpriced hotel room. I fixed her laptop, cleared the cache, updated the drivers, made it run like new. Then I went upstairs and handed it to her with a smile. "All fixed," I said. "Should run much better now." She barely looked up from her coffee. "Thanks. I've got to run. Big day today?" "I bet," I said, watching her gather her things. She looked good for 45, I had to admit. The gym membership and expensive clothes that I helped pay for were serving her well. "Working late again tonight?" "Probably. The Henderson case is really heating up. I'm sure it is. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." She kissed my cheek, a perfunctory peck that felt about as warm as a handshake, and headed for the door. I watched from the window as she got into her BMW and drove off toward downtown, toward her office and her other life that didn't include me. I poured myself another bourbon, even though it was barely 8 a.m, and started planning. See, Andrea had made a crucial mistake. She'd forgotten that I wasn't just some blue-collar nobody who'd gotten lucky enough to marry up. I'd built my business from nothing, learned to navigate the digital world that increasingly ran everything, and most importantly, I'd learned patience from all those years of taking punches and waiting for the right moment to throw my own. She wanted to play games? Fine. But she'd picked the wrong opponent. I started with her parents. Robert and Margaret Thornton lived in the kind of suburban mansion that screamed, "We have money and want everyone to know it." They'd never approved of their daughter marrying a boxer-turned-computer repair guy, but they'd tolerated me for the sake of family peace. They were also the type of people who cared deeply about appearances and social standing. I composed a carefully worded email, attaching just enough evidence to make my point without being crude about it. The subject line read, "Thought you should know what Andrea's been up to." Send. Next was her boss, Margaret Walsh, senior partner at Walsh, Brennan and Associates. Another woman who valued reputation above all else. Another carefully crafted email, this one focusing on the professional implications of Andrea's behavior and how it might reflect on the firm. Send. Then came her sister Janet, her college roommate Patricia, and her book club friends. Each email tailored to the recipient, each one containing just enough evidence to ensure they'd believe what they were seeing. By noon, I'd sent 15 emails to the most important people in Andrea's life. Not to hurt her, I told myself, but to give her the same gift she'd given me, the truth about who she really was. My phone started ringing around 2 o'clock. "Jake, what the hell is going on?" It was Janet, Andrea's sister, her voice tight with panic. "I just got your email, and Mom is losing her mind. She's been trying to reach Andrea all day." "I thought you all deserved to know," I said calmly. "I found out last night. Figured it was better coming from me than from some stranger at the hotel." "This is insane. Are you sure about this? I mean, maybe there's an explanation?" "Janet, I've got photos. I've got hotel receipts. I've got text messages that would make a sailor blush. Trust me, there's no innocent explanation here." She was quiet for a long moment. "What are you going to do?" "I honestly don't know yet, but I figured everyone who cares about Andrea should understand what kind of person she really is." After I hung up, I packed a bag. Not much, just enough clothes for a week, my laptop, and the thumb drive with all the evidence. I left a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone to think things through. Don't try to contact me until you're ready to tell the truth about everything." Then I drove to the Riverside Motel, a dive about 10 miles from downtown. $40 a night, cable TV that worked half the time, and a view of the interstate that never slept. It wasn't the Grand Riverside Hotel, but it suited my purposes just fine. I was settling in when my phone exploded with calls and texts. Andrea, her parents, her sister, her friends, everyone wanting explanations, denials, damage control. I turned the phone off and opened my laptop. Time for Phase 2. Andrea had always been proud of her social media presence. Carefully curated photos of our perfect life, inspirational quotes about success and determination, humble brags about her latest legal victories. She had over 1,000 followers, including most of her colleagues and clients. I still had access to her accounts. She'd given me her passwords years ago when she needed help setting everything up, and like most people, she'd never bothered to change them. I didn't post anything obvious. That would be too crude, too easy to dismiss as a bitter husband's revenge. Instead, I started liking and commenting on posts that would raise eyebrows. Photos of romantic restaurants with comments like, "Looks just like the place Matt took me last week." Posts about work-life balance with responses like, "So true. Sometimes the best part of working late isn't the work itself. Subtle, deniable, but enough to plant seeds of doubt in the minds of people who were already starting to wonder about the emails they'd received. By evening, my phone was buzzing constantly despite being turned off. The voicemail box was full, and I had over 50 unread text messages. I ignored them all and went to Murphy's Tavern, a dive bar 3 blocks from the motel where nobody knew my name and the bourbon was cheap enough that I could afford to drink away my troubles. I was on my 3rd glass when the door opened and Andrea walked in. She looked like hell. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her expensive suit was wrinkled like she'd been wearing it for 2 days. She scanned the room until she spotted me, then walked over like she was heading to her own execution. "We need to talk," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Do we?" I took another sip of bourbon, studying her face. "Seems like you've been doing plenty of talking already. Just not to me?" "Jake, please. This is getting out of hand. My parents won't speak to me. My boss called me into her office today and asked if there was anything I needed to tell her about my personal life. People at work are looking at me like I'm some kind of pariah." "Imagine that," I said. "Must be awful having people judge you based on your actions." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Look, I know you're hurt. I know I screwed up. But this isn't the way to handle it. We can work through this. We can go to counseling, figure things out." "Work through what, exactly?" I interrupted. "The lying, the cheating. The fact that you've been making a fool of me for months while I paid the bills and fixed your computer and pretended everything was fine? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Matt and I, You just what? Accidentally fell into bed together every Thursday for 4 months? Accidentally sent each other photos that would get you both fired if your boss saw them? Accidentally spent my money on hotel rooms where you could play house with your boyfriend? She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks like black rain. Please, Jake, I'll end it with Matt. I'll do whatever you want. Just stop this campaign of yours. Stop trying to destroy my life. I finished my bourbon and stood up. I'm not trying to destroy your life, Andrea. I'm just making sure everyone knows who you really are. The same courtesy you showed me. As I walked toward the door, she called after me. This isn't over, Jake. You can't just disappear and expect everything to work out the way you want. I turned back to look at her one last time. You're right. This isn't over. It's just getting started. The next morning brought a new round of phone calls, but this time they weren't all directed at me. I sat in my motel room, scrolling through social media and watching the aftermath of my little truth-telling campaigns spread through Andrea's carefully constructed world like cracks in a windshield. Her book club had apparently held an emergency meeting without her. Her college roommate Patricia had posted a cryptic status about learning who your real friends are. Most tellingly, the law firm's social media accounts had quietly removed several posts featuring Andrea from their feeds. But it was the call from my daughter Emma that really drove home how far this thing had already spiraled. Dad, what the hell did you do? Emma's voice was tight with anger and confusion. She was 22, a senior at State, and had inherited her mother's sharp tongue along with my stubborn streak. Mom's been crying for 2 days straight, and Grandma Thornton called me screaming about some emails you sent. I told people the truth, Em, that's all. The truth? Dad, you basically carpet-bombed Mom's entire life. Her job, her family, her friends. Everyone's talking about this. It's all over social media. I felt a twinge of something that might have been guilt, but I pushed it down. Your mother made her choices, Emma. I just made sure people knew what those choices were. So you decided to humiliate her publicly? To destroy her reputation? That's your idea of handling this like an adult? What would you have preferred? That I just sit quietly while she continued her affair? That I pretend everything was fine while she made a fool of me? Emma was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. I knew something was wrong. The way she'd been acting lately, all the late nights, the phone calls she'd take in other rooms. I just hoped. I don't know what I hoped. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, kiddo, but I wasn't going to be the only one living in denial anymore. Where are you staying? Mom says you just disappeared. I'm fine. Just need some time to figure things out. Dad, please, come home. We can all sit down and work through this like a family. There is no family anymore, Em. Your mother made sure of that. After I hung up, I sat staring at the water-stained ceiling of my motel room, wondering if maybe I'd gone too far. Then I remembered the photos I'd found on Andrea's laptop, the hotel receipts, the messages where she and Matt had laughed about how clueless I was, and the guilt evaporated like morning mist. I had work to do. Matt Brennan lived in a trendy downtown condo complex called Harbor View, the kind of place where young professionals went to feel sophisticated while paying twice what their apartments were worth. I'd done some research on Andrea's boyfriend, and what I'd found wasn't particularly impressive. Mid-level real estate agent, decent sales record, divorced 2 years ago after his ex-wife caught him with a secretary. Apparently, Andrea wasn't his first affair with a married woman. I parked across the street and waited. I'd learned patience in the boxing ring, where rushing in without a plan was a good way to get your lights turned out. This required the same discipline. At 7:30, Matt emerged from the building, dressed in an expensive suit and carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than most people made in a week. He was handsome in that generic Ken doll way that seemed to appeal to women going through midlife crises. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, and the kind of confident swagger that came from never having to face real consequences for his actions. That was about to change. I followed him to Starbucks, where he ordered some complicated drink with more syllables than my high school diploma. While he waited, scrolling through his phone with the self-important air of someone who thought the world revolved around his text messages, I approached the counter. "Excuse me," I said to the barista, a college kid with purple hair and enough piercings to set off a metal detector. "See that guy over there? The one in the gray suit?" She glanced over. "Yeah?" "He's been harassing my daughter, sending her inappropriate messages, following her around campus. I was wondering if you could help me out with something." The barista's expression darkened. "What kind of help?" I slipped her a 20. When you call his order, could you maybe announce it a little louder than usual, and maybe mention that it's from Jake Morrison? She pocketed the money. You got it. A few minutes later, the barista called out in a voice that carried across the entire coffee shop. Double shot venti caramel macchiato for Matt from Jake Morrison. Matt's head snapped up, his eyes scanning the crowd until they found me sitting at a corner table. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. He grabbed his coffee and walked over, trying to look casual but failing miserably. Jake, he said, sliding into the chair across from me. This is unexpected. Is it? I took a sip of my black coffee. No fancy drinks for me, thanks. I figured it was time we had a conversation. Look, I know this situation is complicated. Complicated? I interrupted. That's an interesting way to describe adultery. I usually just call it what it is. Matt glanced around nervously. The coffee shop was packed with morning commuters, and several people were already staring in our direction. Maybe we could discuss this somewhere more private. I'm comfortable here, unless you're worried about people overhearing something. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. What do you want, Jake? I want to understand something. See, I've been married to Andrea for 23 years. I know she can be difficult, demanding, cold sometimes. But I also know she's smart enough not to throw away her marriage for just anyone. So I'm curious, what makes you special? I don't think this conversation is productive. Oh, but I do. See, I've been doing some research on you, Matt. Interesting life you've led. Divorced 2 years ago after your wife found out about your secretary. Before that, there was the incident with your boss's wife at the Christmas party. And let's not forget the harassment complaint that mysteriously disappeared after your father-in-law made some phone calls. Matt's face had gone completely white. I don't know where you're getting your information. The internet's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Amazing what you can find if you know where to look. Public records, court documents, social media posts that people thought they'd deleted. It's all there if you're patient enough to dig for it. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a manila envelope, placing it on the table between us. This contains copies of everything I've found about you, Matt. Your financial troubles, your history with married women, even some photos from your college days that I'm sure your current clients would find fascinating. What do you want? He repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. I want you to disappear from my wife's life. Completely. No more late nights at the office, no more business dinners, no more text messages. You're going to transfer to another department, or better yet, find another job entirely. You can't just... Can't what? Can't protect my marriage? Can't expose a serial adulterer who preys on vulnerable women? I think you'll find that I can do quite a lot, Matt. I stood up, leaving the envelope on the table. You've got 24 hours to make your decision. After that, copies of everything in that envelope go to your boss, your clients, and anyone else who might be interested in knowing what kind of man they're doing business with. As I walked toward the door, I heard him call after me. Jake, wait! I turned back. What? This won't solve anything. Even if I disappear, it won't fix your marriage. Andrea's not happy, and getting rid of me won't change that. You're probably right, I said, but it'll make me feel better. The rest of the day passed in a blur of small satisfactions. I drove by Andrea's office building and saw her BMW in the parking garage, right next to Matt's silver Audi. I wondered if they were having an emergency meeting, trying to figure out how to handle the situation I'd created. Around 3 o'clock, my phone rang. Unknown number. Jake Morrison? The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. This is Margaret Walsh from Walsh, Brennan and Associates. I believe you know my employee, Andrea Morrison? Andrea's boss. This should be interesting. I do. She's my wife. I see. Well, Mr. Morrison, I'm calling because we've received some rather disturbing information about Mrs. Morrison's conduct, and I wanted to verify the authenticity of certain documents before we proceed with any internal actions. What kind of documents? Email communications, photographs, and financial records that suggest Mrs. Morrison may have been engaging in inappropriate behavior with a colleague. The materials were sent to us anonymously, but they appear to be quite detailed. I smiled. Someone else had decided to get involved in my little campaign, probably one of Andrea's enemies at the firm. She'd made plenty of them over the years with her ambition and ruthless tactics. I can't speak to any anonymous materials, I said carefully. But if you have specific questions about my wife's behavior, I'd be happy to discuss them. That won't be necessary at this time. We'll be conducting our own investigation. I just wanted to confirm that you and Mrs. Morrison are currently separated. We are. I see. Well, thank you for your time, Mr. Morrison. After she hung up, I sat back and considered the implications. Andrea's career was built on her reputation, the image of the successful, ethical attorney who could be trusted with sensitive cases and important clients. If that reputation was damaged, everything she'd worked for would crumble. Part of me felt bad about that. The part that remembered the young law student I'd fallen in love with, the woman who used to stay up all night studying while I worked double shifts to help pay for her education. But that woman had been replaced by someone I barely recognized, someone who could look me in the eye every morning while planning to meet her lover that evening. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at Murphy's at 8. Come alone. M." Matt, apparently, had made his decision. I arrived at Murphy's early and claimed the same booth I'd sat in the night before when Andrea had tracked me down. The place was busier tonight, a mix of blue-collar workers drowning their sorrows and young professionals slumming it for the authentic dive bar experience. Matt showed up exactly at 8, looking like he'd aged 5 years since our coffee shop encounter. His perfect hair was disheveled, his tie was loose, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. He slid into the booth across from me without saying hello. "You win," he said simply. "Do I?" "I talked to my boss today. Told him I needed to transfer to the Portland office for personal reasons. He's arranging the paperwork." That was fast. I also ended things with Andrea. Told her it was getting too complicated, that I couldn't risk my career anymore. I signaled the bartender for another bourbon. How'd she take that? About as well as you'd expect. She's convinced this is all temporary, that once you calm down, everything will go back to normal. Will it? Matt shook his head. "I've been down this road before, Jake. The angry husband, the public exposure, the professional consequences. It never ends well for anyone involved. Sounds like you should have thought about that before you started the affair." "You're right, I should have, but Andrea can be very persuasive when she wants something." "That's not an excuse." "No, it's not." He was quiet for a moment, staring into his untouched beer. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just about getting caught, about the whole thing. I knew she was married, knew she had a family. I did it anyway because I'm selfish and weak, and I thought I could get away with it. At least you're honest about it. I'm leaving town tomorrow. The transfer doesn't officially start for 2 weeks, but I figure it's better if I just disappear for a while, let things cool down." I studied his face, looking for signs of deception, but he seemed genuinely defeated. "What about Andrea? What about her? You said she thinks this is temporary. What happens when she realizes you're not coming back?" Matt shrugged. "That's not my problem anymore. I'm done being the other man, Jake. It's a role that never ends well." After he left, I sat alone in the booth, nursing my bourbon and wondering what came next. I'd accomplished what I'd set out to do. Exposed the affair, humiliated Andrea publicly, and driven away her lover. But instead of feeling satisfied, I felt hollow, like a boxer who'd won a fight by default when his opponent failed to show up. My phone rang. Emma again. "Dad, where are you? Mom's been calling everyone, trying to find you. She's completely falling apart." "I'm fine, Em. Just taking some time to think." "Well, while you're thinking, maybe you should know that Mom lost a big client today. Something about the firm questioning her judgment and professionalism. She's convinced you're behind it somehow." "I'm not responsible for the consequences of her actions." "Aren't you? Dad, I get that you're hurt and angry. I really do. But this scorched earth thing you're doing, it's not just hurting Mom, it's hurting me too. Do you have any idea what it's like having people at school asking me about my parents' divorce? Having my friends send me links to gossip posts about my family?" The guilt hit me like a punch to the solar plexus. In all my planning and scheming, I'd somehow managed to forget that Emma would be caught in the crossfire of my revenge campaign. "I'm sorry, kiddo. I never meant for you to get hurt by this." "Then come home, please. We can figure this out together, as a family." "There is no family anymore, Em. Your mother made sure of that when she decided to have an affair." "So that's it? 23 years of marriage, and you're just going to throw it all away because Mom made a mistake?" "A mistake? Emma, your mother has been lying to me for months. She's been spending our money on hotel rooms where she could cheat on me. She's been coming home and kissing me goodnight after spending the evening with another man. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. A series of choices." Emma was crying now. "I know what she did was wrong, Dad, but destroying her life isn't going to fix anything. It's just going to make everything worse for everyone." "Maybe, but at least everyone will know the truth." "The truth? What truth? That people sometimes make terrible decisions when they're unhappy? That marriages sometimes fall apart? That's not some big revelation, Dad. That's just life." After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone, wondering if maybe Emma was right. Maybe I had gone too far. Maybe there was still time to pull back, to try to salvage something from the wreckage of my marriage. Then I remembered the photos on Andrea's laptop, and the doubt disappeared like smoke in the wind. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. 3 days after Matt's departure, Andrea finally tracked me down again. This time, she didn't bother with the dramatic entrance at Murphy's Tavern. She simply appeared at my motel room door at 6 a.m, looking like she hadn't slept in a week. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the shabby room before I could protest. I closed the door and turned to face her. She was wearing jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, the first time I'd seen her in casual clothes in years. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wasn't wearing makeup. She looked more like the woman I'd married than she had in a long time, which somehow made everything worse. "Nice place," she said, glancing around at the faded wallpaper and stained carpet. "Very you." "It serves its purpose." "Which is what exactly? Punishing yourself? Or just making sure I feel as miserable as possible?" I poured myself coffee from the cheap machine on the dresser. "Want some?" "I want my husband back." "That's interesting, considering you spent the last 4 months pretending you didn't have one." She sat down heavily on the room's single chair, suddenly looking older than her 45 years. "Jake, please, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But this campaign of destruction you're waging, it has to stop." "Campaign of destruction? That's a bit dramatic, don't you think?" "Is it? Let's see. You've told my parents, my sister, my friends, and my colleagues about the affair. You've somehow gotten Matt transferred to another state. You've been manipulating my social media accounts to make me look like an idiot. And now I'm hearing rumors that someone's been spreading stories about me all over town." "People talk, Andrea, especially when they find out someone they trusted has been living a lie." "I lost the Henderson case," she said quietly. "Margaret called me into her office yesterday and told me the client requested a different attorney. Apparently they were concerned about my personal stability affecting my professional judgment. I felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy, but I pushed it down. That's unfortunate." "Unfortunate? Jake, that case was worth $200,000 to the firm. Margaret's talking about putting me on probation, maybe even letting me go entirely." "Then maybe you should have thought about the professional consequences before you decided to have an affair." She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. "You want to know why I did it? You really want to know?" "I'm listening." "Because I felt invisible. Because you stopped seeing me as anything other than a roommate who happened to share your last name. When was the last time we went out together, Jake? When was the last time we had a real conversation about anything other than bills, or Emma's college expenses, or whose turn it was to take out the trash?" "So, this is my fault?" "No, it's not your fault. But it's not entirely mine either. We both let our marriage die, Jake. I just found someone who made me feel alive again. By lying and cheating and sneaking around like a teenager." "Yes," she exploded. "By lying and cheating and sneaking around. Because at least when I was with Matt, I felt like someone actually wanted me. Like someone thought I was worth pursuing, worth taking risks for." "And what about what I wanted? What about the 23 years I spent working to build a life with you?" "What life? Jake, we've been living like strangers for years. You come home, eat dinner in front of the TV, work on your computers, and go to bed. I work late, come home to an empty house, and pretend everything's fine. We're like two actors playing roles in a play neither of us wants to be in anymore." She had a point, and I resented her for it. Our marriage had been fading slowly and quietly for years, and we'd both been too stubborn or too scared to acknowledge it. But that didn't excuse what she'd done. So instead of talking to me about it, instead of suggesting counseling or separation or anything else, you decided to have an affair. I decided to feel human again. I decided to remember what it was like to have someone look at me like I was desirable instead of just convenient. And now? She sat back down, suddenly deflated. Now Matt's gone, my career's in ruins, my family won't speak to me, and my husband is living in a motel room planning my destruction. I'm not planning anything, Andrea. I'm just making sure people know who you really are. Who I really am. And who's that, Jake? A woman who made a terrible mistake because she was lonely and desperate? A woman who threw away everything good in her life for a few months of feeling wanted? A woman who chose to lie to her husband every day for 4 months? A woman who spent our money on hotel rooms where she could cheat on me? A woman who came home and kissed me goodnight after spending the evening with another man? She flinched like I'd slapped her. I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you. But what you're doing now? This isn't justice, Jake. This is revenge. Maybe, but it's also the truth. The truth? The truth is that we were both miserable long before Matt came along. The truth is that our marriage was over in everything but name years ago. The truth is that I should have had the courage to leave you instead of having an affair, and you should have had the courage to fight for us instead of just giving up. I didn't give up. I just got tired of being the only one trying. When was the last time you told me you loved me? The question caught me off guard. I tried to remember, but couldn't. When was the last time you acted like you wanted to hear it? We stared at each other across the shabby motel room, 23 years of marriage reduced to accusations and counter-accusations, hurt piled on top of hurt until neither of us could remember what we'd been fighting for in the first place. I'm filing for divorce, she said finally. I've already talked to a lawyer. Good. That'll make things easier. Will it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're determined to make this as difficult and painful as possible for both of us. I'm determined to make sure everyone knows the truth about what happened to our marriage. And after that, after you've destroyed my reputation and my career and my relationships with everyone I care about, what then, Jake? Will you finally be satisfied? I didn't have an answer for that, and she seemed to take my silence as confirmation of her worst fears. You used to be a good man, she said, standing up and walking toward the door. I fell in love with a good man. But the person you've become, this vindictive, cruel stranger, I don't even recognize you anymore. Funny, I said, as she reached for the door handle. I was thinking the same thing about you. After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall, trying to figure out why her words had hit me so hard. Maybe because part of me knew she was right. Maybe because the man I'd become, calculating, ruthless, determined to inflict maximum damage, wasn't someone I particularly liked. But it was too late to turn back now. The wheels were already in motion, and Andrea was about to discover just how far I was willing to go to make sure everyone knew exactly what kind of person she really was. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Jake, this is Tara Williams, Andrea's friend from book club. We need to talk. It's about Andrea and what's been happening. Meet me at Cafe Luna downtown at 2 p.m. if you're interested in the whole truth. Tara Williams. I remembered her, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who'd always struck me as someone who saw everything and forgot nothing. She'd been at our wedding, at Emma's graduation, at countless dinner parties and social gatherings over the years. If anyone knew the full story of Andrea's affair, it would be her. I arrived at Cafe Luna 15 minutes early and claimed a corner table where I could watch the door. The place was busy with the lunch crowd, a mix of office workers and college students grabbing quick meals between classes. Tara arrived exactly on time, scanning the room until she spotted me. She was dressed in a business suit that probably cost more than I made in a week, her dark hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She looked like success, which made me wonder why she wanted to talk to me about my failing marriage. Jake, she said, sliding into the chair across from me. Thank you for coming. Thank you for reaching out. Though I have to admit I'm curious why you wanted to meet. She ordered coffee from the waitress, then leaned forward with the intensity of someone about to share a secret. Because there are things about Andrea's situation that you don't know. Things that might change how you feel about what's been happening. Such as? Such as the fact that Andrea's affair with Matt wasn't her idea. I felt like she'd just told me the sky was green. What do you mean it wasn't her idea? I mean someone encouraged it. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing and why. Who? Tara smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Me. The confession hit me like a punch to the gut. You? Oh, don't look so shocked, Jake. You're not the only one with reasons to want Andrea taken down a few pegs. What reasons? Do you remember about 3 years ago when Andrea helped you hire that new employee for your business, the woman who turned out to be embezzling from you? I remembered. Sarah Chen, a bookkeeper who'd seemed perfect until I discovered she'd been skimming money from client payments. I'd had to let her go and nearly went bankrupt covering the losses. What does that have to do with anything? Sarah Chen is my sister. The pieces started falling into place, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. Your sister? My married sister, who used her maiden name professionally. When you fired her and pressed charges, she lost everything. Her job, her reputation, her marriage when her husband found out about the embezzlement. She tried to get work elsewhere, but Andrea made sure everyone in town knew what she'd done. She was stealing from me. Yes, she was, and she deserved to face consequences for that. But Andrea didn't stop with justice, did she? She made it personal. She made sure Sarah couldn't get work anywhere in the city. She destroyed her life completely. I remembered now. Andrea's satisfaction when she'd heard that Sarah had been forced to move to another state to find work. Her casual comments about making sure people like that faced real consequences for their actions. So you decided to get revenge by destroying Andrea's marriage? I decided to give Andrea a taste of her own medicine. I introduced her to Matt at a conference last year, knowing his history with married women. I encouraged their friendship, suggested they work together on cases, made sure they had opportunities to be alone together. You orchestrated the whole thing. I planted the seeds. Andrea chose to water them. I felt sick. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know the truth, and because what you've been doing to Andrea, it's exactly what she did to my sister. You've destroyed her reputation, her career, her relationships. You've made sure everyone knows what she did and judges her for it. She cheated on me. Yes, she did, and my sister stole from you. Both women made terrible choices and faced the consequences. The question is, when does justice become revenge? And when does revenge become cruelty? I stared at her, trying to process what I'd just learned. You manipulated both of us. I created an opportunity. You and Andrea did the rest yourselves. And now? Now I think we're even. Andrea's paid the price for what she did to my family. You've paid the price for what you did to my sister. Maybe it's time for everyone to move on. After Tara left, I sat alone at the cafe table, staring into my cold coffee and trying to figure out how I felt about what I'd just learned. On one hand, knowing that Andrea's affair had been orchestrated by someone else didn't change the fact that she'd chosen to have it. She could have said no to Matt's advances, could have stayed faithful to our marriage vows regardless of whatever encouragement Tara had provided. On the other hand, the knowledge that I'd been manipulated, that my pain and anger had been used as weapons in someone else's revenge plot, made me feel like a fool. My phone rang. Emma. Dad, something's happened. You need to come home. What's wrong? It's Mom. She's in the hospital. The drive from downtown to Riverside General took 15 minutes that felt like 15 hours. I found Emma in the waiting room, her eyes red from crying, looking younger than her 22 years. What happened? I asked, pulling her into a hug. She collapsed at work. They think it was exhaustion and stress. She's been barely eating or sleeping since all this started. Guilt hit me like a freight train. Is she okay? She's stable. The doctor says she needs rest and to avoid stress, which is pretty much impossible given everything that's been happening. Can I see her? Emma looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. She doesn't want to see you, Dad. She asked me to tell you that she's fine and you don't need to worry about her anymore. I sat down heavily in one of the uncomfortable waiting room chairs. Em, there's something I need to tell you. About your mother's affair, about everything that's been happening. I told her about Tara, about the manipulation, about how we'd all been pawns in someone else's game of revenge. Emma listened without interrupting, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. So what are you going to do? She asked when I finished. I don't know. Do you still love her? The question caught me off guard. What? Mom, do you still love her? I thought about it, really thought about it, for the first time since I discovered the affair. Underneath all the anger and hurt and desire for revenge, was there still something left of what we'd once had? I don't know, I said honestly. I love who she used to be. I'm not sure I know who she is now. Maybe that's something you should figure out before you decide what to do next. Emma was right, of course, but figuring out how I felt about Andrea was going to have to wait, because my campaign of revenge was about to reach its climax and there was one more person who needed to understand the consequences of their actions. Tara Williams had orchestrated this whole mess, and it was time she faced some consequences of her own. Planning Tara's downfall required a different approach than what I'd used with Andrea and Matt. They'd been guilty of obvious moral failures, adultery, betrayal, lies. Tara's crime was more subtle: manipulation, orchestration, the patient cultivation of other people's weaknesses for her own purposes. But subtlety was something I'd learned to appreciate over the past few weeks. I spent 2 days researching Tara Williams, using the same digital detective skills that had uncovered Andrea's affair. What I found was fascinating. Tara wasn't just Andrea's book club friend. She was a successful marketing consultant who specialized in what she called reputation management for high-profile clients. In other words, she was a professional manipulator. Her client list included politicians, celebrities, and business leaders who'd found themselves in various scandals. Her job was to craft narratives, manage public perception, and turn negative publicity into positive outcomes. She was very good at it, and she charged accordingly. More interesting was what I found about her personal life. Tara had been married 3 times, each marriage ending in divorce after her husband discovered affairs. She had a pattern of identifying powerful, successful men, seducing them, and then using their resources and connections to advance her own career before moving on to the next target. Her current husband, Michael Williams, was a successful surgeon who apparently had no idea about his wife's history or her role in orchestrating Andrea's affair. Based on his social media posts, he seemed to genuinely love and trust her, which made what I was about to do feel almost justified. Almost. I started by creating a fake social media profile. Nothing elaborate, just a basic account for Jennifer Walsh, a fictional marketing professional from Chicago who was considering hiring Tara for a reputation management project. I reached out to several of Tara's former clients, claiming to be conducting due diligence on her services. What I learned was illuminating. 3 of her former clients complained that Tara had used confidential information about their scandals to manipulate other people in their social circles. 2 others suggested that she'd actually created problems for competitors while solving their own issues, essentially playing multiple sides against each other for maximum profit. But it was the conversation with her second ex-husband that really gave me what I needed. Tara's brilliant, Richard Coleman told me over the phone. Absolutely brilliant at understanding people's weaknesses and using them for her own purposes. The problem is, she can't help herself. Even when she doesn't need to manipulate someone, she does it anyway, just to prove she can. Can you give me an example? She once orchestrated an affair between my business partner and his secretary, just because she was bored and wanted to see if she could break up their marriage. She had no stake in the outcome, no reason to get involved. She just enjoyed the intellectual challenge of pulling the strings and watching people dance. Did your partner ever find out? Not until after Tara and I divorced and I told him the truth. By then, his marriage was over and his business was in ruins. Tara had moved on to her next husband and forgotten all about the chaos she'd created. After I hung up, I sat back and considered my options. I could expose Tara's history to her current husband, destroy her marriage the same way she destroyed mine. I could contact her clients and reveal her unethical practices, ruin her business reputation. I could even go to the police with evidence of her pattern of manipulation and fraud. But none of those approaches felt quite right. They were too direct, too obvious. Tara was a professional manipulator who'd spent years covering her tracks and managing her own reputation. She'd probably find ways to spin any direct attack into sympathy for herself. No, what Tara needed was a taste of her own medicine. She needed to be manipulated by someone better at the game than she was. I called Andrea. Jake? Her voice was weak, tired. She was still in the hospital, and I could hear the beeping of monitors in the background. How are you feeling? Like I've been hit by a truck. Why are you calling? Because I found out who's really responsible for destroying our marriage. I told her about Tara, about the manipulation, about how we'd both been pawns in someone else's revenge plot. Andrea listened in silence, and I could almost hear her analytical mind processing the information. That manipulative witch, she said finally. I should have known. She was always too eager to give me advice about my personal life, always pushing me to live a little and take some risks. The question is, what are we going to do about it? We? Tara destroyed our marriage for her own purposes. Don't you think she should face some consequences for that? Andrea was quiet for a long moment. What did you have in mind? I think it's time Tara learned what it feels like to have her life manipulated by someone else. Jake, I'm barely holding my life together as it is. I can't get involved in some revenge scheme against Tara. You don't have to get directly involved. Just give me access to your book club group chat, your social media connections with her, things like that. Let me use your existing relationship to get close to her. And then what? Then I show her exactly what it feels like to be on the receiving end of her own tactics. Andrea agreed to help, though I could tell she had reservations. Within an hour, I had access to her book club communications, her social media connections with Tara, and detailed information about Tara's social circle and daily routines. The plan I developed was elegant in its simplicity. Tara's book club was planning a weekend retreat at a lakeside cabin owned by one of the members. It was supposed to be a chance for the women to relax, discuss literature, and bond over wine and gossip. Perfect. Using Andrea's social media account, I started dropping hints about exciting news that Andrea would share at the retreat. I made sure the hints were vague but intriguing, references to finally getting the recognition I deserve, and some people are about to get exactly what's coming to them. I also started a whisper campaign among the book club members, using fake social media accounts to plant rumors about Tara's professional practices. Nothing direct, nothing actionable, just enough doubt and suspicion to make people start questioning her motives and methods. The weekend of the retreat, I drove to the lakeside cabin and set up surveillance from a rented cabin across the lake. High-powered binoculars, digital cameras with telephoto lenses, and audio recording equipment that could pick up conversations from several hundred yards away. I watched as the book club members arrived. 8 women in their 40s and 50s, carrying weekend bags and bottles of wine, chatting and laughing as they settled into the cabin. Andrea wasn't there, of course. She was still recovering in the hospital. but I'd made sure the other women knew she'd planned to make a big announcement before her collapse. Tara arrived last, and I could see the tension in her body language even from across the lake. She knew something was wrong, could sense the undercurrents of suspicion and hostility among the other women, but couldn't quite figure out what was happening. The first evening proceeded normally, dinner, wine, discussion of the month's book selection, but I could see the women watching Tara, studying her reactions, looking for signs of whatever guilt or deception they'd been primed to expect. On Saturday morning, things started to unravel. I'd arranged for Tara to receive a series of anonymous text messages, each one revealing a different piece of information about her past manipulations. Her role in orchestrating Andrea's affair, her history of destroying other people's marriages for entertainment, her pattern of using confidential client information for personal gain. I watched through my binoculars as she read each message, her face growing paler with each revelation. She tried to hide her distress from the other women, but it was obvious that something was wrong. By Saturday afternoon, the atmosphere at the cabin had turned toxic. The other women had started asking pointed questions about Tara's relationship with Andrea, her knowledge of the affair, her role in various social dramas over the years. Tara tried to deflect and deny, but she was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. The confrontation came during dinner on Saturday night. "Tara," said Margaret Chen, the book club's unofficial leader, "we need to talk about some things we've been hearing." "What things?" "About your role in Andrea's affair, about your history of manipulating people for your own entertainment, about whether we can trust anything you've ever told us." I watched through my telephoto lens as Tara's carefully constructed social facade finally cracked. She tried to maintain her composure, but the combined weight of suspicion, evidence, and social pressure was too much. "You don't understand," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the lake in the still night air. "Andrea needed to learn a lesson. She destroyed my sister's life, ruined her completely. Someone had to make her pay for that." "So you destroyed her marriage?" "I created an opportunity. Andrea chose to take it." "And what about Jake? What about their daughter? Did they deserve to suffer for whatever grudge you had against Andrea?" "Sometimes innocent people get hurt when justice is served. That's not my fault." "Justice?" "Tara, you manipulated two people into destroying their marriage because you wanted revenge. That's not justice. That's cruelty." The argument continued for another hour, voices rising and falling, accusations flying back and forth. By the end of it, Tara was completely isolated, her friendships destroyed, her reputation in ruins among the people who mattered most to her social standing. She left the cabin at midnight, throwing her bags into her car and driving off into the darkness while the other women watched from the windows. I packed up my surveillance equipment and drove back to town, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and emptiness that was becoming familiar. Another enemy defeated, another wrong avenged, another piece of my old life destroyed in the process. But there was still one more confrontation to come. One more person who needed to understand the consequences of their actions. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad, Mom's being released from the hospital tomorrow. She wants to see you, says it's important." Time for the final round. I met Andrea at our house, the house we'd shared for 15 years, the house that no longer felt like home to either of us. She was waiting in the kitchen when I arrived, sitting at the table where we'd eaten thousands of meals together, looking fragile but determined. "You look better," I said, taking the chair across from her. "I feel better, physically anyway." She gestured to a manila folder on the table between us. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened, about us, about Tara, about what comes next. And I think we need to finish what we started." I opened the folder. Inside were photographs, documents, and printed emails. Evidence of Tara's manipulation not just of our marriage, but of dozens of other people over the years. Client confidentiality violations, manufactured scandals, orchestrated affairs, and divorces, all carefully documented and cross-referenced. "Where did you get all this?" "I have friends in the legal community, people who've been wondering about Tara for years but never had enough evidence to act. Your little lakeside revelation gave them the push they needed to start sharing information." I flipped through the documents, amazed at the scope of Tara's manipulations. She'd been playing puppet master with people's lives for over a decade, always careful to stay in the shadows, always making sure someone else took the blame for the chaos she created. "What do you want to do with this?" "I want to destroy her completely. Her business, her marriage, her reputation, everything. The same way she tried to destroy us." "Andrea?" "No, Jake, don't try to talk me out of this. That woman manipulated us into destroying our marriage for her own sick entertainment. She turned our pain into her personal revenge fantasy. She deserves everything that's coming to her." I studied my wife's face, looking for signs of the woman I'd fallen in love with 23 years ago. What I saw instead was someone harder, colder, more calculating than the person I'd married, someone who'd learned to enjoy revenge as much as I had. "What about us?" I asked. "What about us? Are we going to work together on this and then go back to hating each other? Are we going to destroy Tara and then destroy ourselves in the divorce proceedings?" Andrea was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. "I don't know. I don't know if there's anything left to save between us. Do you want there to be?" "I want there to be. But wanting something and being able to achieve it are two different things. We could try counseling. We could try to work through what happened. Could you forgive me? Really forgive me, not just say the words, but actually let go of the anger and resentment?" I thought about it honestly. "I don't know. Could you forgive me for what I've done to you over the past few weeks?" "I don't know either." We sat in silence for a moment, two people who'd spent half their lives together trying to figure out if they had any future at all. "Let's make a deal," I said finally. "Let's finish what we started with Tara. Let's make sure she pays for what she did to us and to all the other people she's manipulated over the years. And then, when that's done, let's sit down and have an honest conversation about whether our marriage is worth saving. And if we decide it's not, then we'll end it with dignity instead of destroying each other in the process." Andrea reached across the table and took my hand, the first time we'd touched in weeks. "Deal." The plan we developed was comprehensive and ruthless. We would expose Tara's professional misconduct to her clients, her regulatory boards, and the media. We would reveal her personal manipulations to her husband, her friends, and her social circle. We would make sure everyone who'd ever trusted her understood exactly what kind of person she really was. But we would do it all at once, in a coordinated campaign that would give her no time to spin the narrative or manage the damage. We started by contacting every person in the evidence files, former clients, ex-husbands, victims of her manipulations. Most were eager to share their stories once they understood they weren't alone, that there was a pattern of behavior spanning years. Andrea used her legal connections to file complaints with the State Marketing Board and the Better Business Bureau. I used my technical skills to create a comprehensive website documenting Tara's history, complete with testimonials from victims and copies of incriminating documents. We reached out to local media outlets, offering them an exclusive story about a local businesswoman who'd been manipulating clients and orchestrating personal scandals for over a decade. And we prepared a special presentation for Tara's husband, Michael, a detailed timeline of his wife's affairs, manipulations, and professional misconduct that would leave no room for doubt or denial. The campaign launched on a Tuesday morning. By noon, Tara's phone was ringing constantly with calls from angry clients, suspicious reporters, and regulatory investigators. Her website crashed from traffic overload. Her social media accounts were flooded with comments from people she'd manipulated over the years. I watched it all unfold from my motel room, monitoring news websites and social media feeds, tracking the spread of the story through the local community. It was like watching a controlled demolition. Everything Tara had built over the years collapsing in a matter of hours. The coup de grace came that evening, when Michael Williams held a press conference outside their home. "I've just learned that my wife has been living a double life for years," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "She's betrayed not just me, but dozens of clients and friends who trusted her. I'm filing for divorce immediately, and I'll be cooperating fully with any investigations into her conduct." By the end of the week, Tara Williams was finished. Her business was under investigation, her marriage was over, her social circle had abandoned her, and her reputation was destroyed beyond repair. She'd become a cautionary tale, an example of what happened when manipulation and cruelty finally caught up with someone. I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt empty, like a boxer who'd won a fight by beating his opponent into unconsciousness. "It's done," I told Andrea when I called to give her the final update. "How do you feel?" "Tired. You?" "The same. Jake, can you come over? I think it's time for that conversation we promised to have." I found Andrea in our living room, sitting on the couch where we'd watched 1,000 movies together, surrounded by photo albums and mementos from our 23 years of marriage. "I've been going through our old pictures," she said, making room for me to sit beside her, "trying to remember when things started going wrong." I picked up one of the albums, our wedding photos. We looked so young, so hopeful, so certain that love would be enough to carry us through whatever challenges life threw at us. "Do you remember what you said to me on our wedding day?" Andrea asked. "I said a lot of things. You said that no matter what happened, no matter how hard things got, we'd face it together. You said we were a team. We were. For a long time, we were. When did we stop being a team?" I thought about it. I think it was gradual. Work pressures, financial stress, raising Emma, just the daily grind of life. We stopped talking to each other and started talking past each other. And instead of addressing the problem, we both just retreated into our own worlds. You into your career, me into my business, until we were strangers living in the same house. We sat in silence, looking through the photos, remembering better times, vacations, holidays, Emma's childhood milestones, moments when we'd been genuinely happy together. "I'm sorry," Andrea said finally, "for the affair, for the lies, for giving up on us instead of fighting to save our marriage. I'm sorry, too, for the revenge campaign, for humiliating you publicly, for choosing destruction over reconciliation. Do you think we can find our way back to each other?" I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years. Underneath the stress and exhaustion and pain of the past few weeks, I could still see traces of the woman I'd fallen in love with, the ambitious law student who'd stayed up all night studying, the young mother who'd sung lullabies to Emma, the partner who'd celebrated my business successes and comforted me through failures. "I'd like to try," I said, "if you're willing." "It won't be easy. There's a lot of damage to repair, a lot of trust to rebuild. The best things never are easy." She leaned against me, and I put my arm around her, holding her close for the first time in months. It felt strange and familiar at the same time, like coming home after a long journey to find that everything had changed, but somehow remained the same. "What do we do now?" she asked. "Now we start over. We go to counseling, we learn to talk to each other again, we figure out how to be married instead of just living together. And if it doesn't work, then at least we'll know we tried. At least we'll be able to say we gave our marriage every chance to survive." My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Saw the news about Tara. Are you and Mom okay?" I showed the message to Andrea. "What should I tell her?" "Tell her we're working on it." I typed back, "We're working on it. Come over for dinner tomorrow. Your mom's making her famous lasagna." Emma's response came immediately. "Really? You're both going to be there?" "Both of us," I confirmed. "I'll be there. Love you both." I put my phone away and pulled Andrea closer. Outside, the sun was setting over our neighborhood, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. It was the same view we'd enjoyed for 15 years, but somehow it looked different now, more hopeful, more full of possibility. "Jake? Yeah? Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on us completely, for being willing to try again." "Thank you for the same thing." We sat together as darkness fell, two people who'd lost their way but found each other again, ready to begin the long, difficult work of rebuilding what they'd almost destroyed. The war was over. Now came the harder task of learning how to live in peace,